Defining the parameters of each object. Now the next thing we want to do is define the parameters of each one of these objects. As you can see, just by clicking on each object, I can view a window here at my left where I can input all the different parameters. All I have to do is click on the object and input the parameters. Another option I could use, if I'm here in the main window of the configuration of the process, I could go here to objects and it displays all the objects grouped by tabs. Okay, so if I want to configure one of the gateways, I'd click here and I'd enter the gateway and I'd configure it. If I want to configure an event or a task, all I have to do is go to each tab and click here. It would be the exact same thing as clicking on this object. So here it took me to the configuration window, the settings window of the star message event that's called product request. But if I click here, it's also going to take me to the same place. In order to input data inside of this form, inside of this start message event, I'm going to click here and I'm going to click on create. I'm going to create a form from scratch. I can create different forms for different interfaces or create a responsive form that could be easily used in any type of interface. So now I'll click here and it takes me to the form editor. In order to start designing my form, all I have to do is click here and add a layer. A layer, or what we call a division, would be like a sheet of paper where I'm going to start drawing. Here it's basically a canvas, and on this canvas I can add whatever I need. The first thing I'm going to do is style this layer a little bit. So I'm going to enter the configuration. I'm going to say I want, for example, I want to customize it. I want it to have a header. Oh, that's 80 pixels. Yeah, that would be okay. And here I'd indicate the color I want. So I can add any color code here, or I could use this palette and indicate a specific color code. Now, once I have my color code, I could add margins, borders. I could add whatever I need. I'm going to actually take these borders off. I don't want any borders. I'll just keep it quite simple. I'll save and exit. And this is what our layer is going to look like. Okay, it's quite a simple layer, just a blue space for the header. And the rest, it's going to be the body. Let's say it's here we're going to add several fields. Okay, I'm also going to add something else. Here there's a complement. I can add any type of multimedia content, for example, images, any other type of content. So here I'm going to put a title so I can move it around anywhere I want. And this title, let's say we want it to be size 16. We want it to be a font Arial and in color. Let's say I want it color white. So here's the complement. Obviously, if I put it on top of a white background, it's going to be difficult to see. But if I leave it here, there we go. That's all I want, some text, just so that we can easily see what this form is. Okay. I'm going to save. And the next thing I'm going to do is start adding some fields. We have all kinds of different types of fields. We're not going to have time in this course to explain all of this, but we're just going to add a few simple fields. If I click on all, I'm going to see I have some automatic system fields that have been created by default, like a reference. This is like a tracking code. And for example, there's date and time fields, like a present date and time. And then I can accept the selection and add these fields to my form. I'm also going to add the star message creator. So this is going to allow me to automatically input the value of who started this process. Okay, we're not going to have to configure anything else. Now, another thing I'd like to do is change the style of these fields. And not only I want to change the style of these fields, but I also want to change where they're positioned and some of the details. I don't want to style this too much, but at least I'll go through a few details so you guys can see how it's done. Okay, so I'm aligning the fields. Now I want to change the labels, so I can enter here and I can change the name of a field to whatever I want. So it's going to be called tracking number. This one here is going to be called request date and time. So I'm going to change it here too. There we go. And this one's going to be called requester. So I'll click on it and I'll change its label. There we go. Now I'm going to add some other fields. As I just mentioned, these are default fields, but I'm going to add some fields from the data repository. So I'll click on all, and I'm going to create a few fields. First, I'm going to create one that's called email. I'm going to search for an email field. I don't have any, so I'll create one from scratch. This is going to be of the type whole line text. And besides, I'm going to condition it so that it can only contain a valid email address. Here I can even test it. For example, I can input whatever value, and it tells me this is incorrect. But if I input a valid email address, okay, now it is correct. All right, so I just condition my field. We can add all kinds of advanced conditional logic, but I'm not going to do it in this case. I'm just going to create a very simple condition. So here we have our email field. I brought it to the panel of this process. The panel of a process is basically what it is. It's the data structure of the process. Okay, so if I click proceed here, I can see all the data. Some of these data fields are being used and others aren't. That's why we don't have them selected. If I select the email field, I'll add it to this form. The next field we're going to create is a little bit more complex. It's going to be a field that's connected to an external data repository. So it's not going to be the data repository of the process, but an external one. So I'm going to click here on all. I'm going to add a field. I'm going to create a type of field called prefix. I'm going to call it product. And here I'm going to be able to select from what data repository I want to extract the data from. So I'll connect it to this one called products. I hit continue, and that's about it. I could do more things, but for now I'm just going to keep it simple. Okay, so I want to filter to bring it to the structure of my process, and from here I want to bring it to the form. So we have another field that's called product. I'm going to add a viewer so I can actually access the record of this element. So in order to do that, I'm going to configure the field, and I'm going to say I want it to display a record. You could have several records, but I'm just going to select this one, the main one. We'll see the result later on. Okay. Besides, I want this to be mandatory. I actually want the email to be mandatory also. There we go. I'm going to add one more field that's called comments. It's going to be a multiple line. Oops, I have to select a division here. Multiple line field. So I'll create it. I'll give it a name. And that's about it. Okay, so here we have our multiple line field. You can see everything is quite easy to display, to move. I can move it with my keyboard. I can move it with my mouse. Okay, this would be enough. The next thing I want to do is add a button. So I'm going to click on action button, and I'm going to give it a name. For example, send request. The title is also going to be send request. And the action here, it's going to be, I want to actually launch the process. So I'm going to mark this action. And here I could show a confirmation division, but first I have to build it. Well, what this is going to do if I add a confirmation division is once we submit the form, a message is going to appear telling us, look, your form was submitted correctly, or whatever text we want, okay? So I'm going to create another division. I could create another division from scratch, or I could actually reuse this division here. And I'm going to reuse it so you guys can see how easy it is to copy something that I've already created. So I click here on copy division. Here it is. Now I've got two. Now in order to use it for different purpose, I'm going to have to delete all this content. I don't want it here. So I'll just delete it. So I've created two layers. There's a first layer with all the fields, and there's a second layer that's going to have a confirmation division. So here I'm going to add some text. So I'm going to add a complement. And here I can add whatever text I want. For example, this. I'm going to add an image too. this one here. I'm going to center this. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. There we go. Okay, I think this is okay. Now the next thing I want to do is configure this button here. So when I start the process, it shows me this confirmation division. So when I just copied, there we go. And now I'm going to set one in back of the other one. So it's not going to be displayed until the process is actually triggered. With this, we finished the configuration of the start message event, but I would like to add one last detail. I want the process to start with default data. So I'm going to click here on add fields, and I'm going to add a default email and some default comments. That way when I'm testing the process, I can test it with whatever text I want here. For example, and here I'm going to add some comments. There we go. Okay, I'm going to save and exit. We'll see the result later on as soon as we test the process. And the next thing I want to do after configuring the start message event is configure these KPIs. Okay, so I'm going to add a description here. For example, as soon as we launch the process, the KPI is going to tell us the request has been sent correctly and is pending revision. You will be notified when the request has been rejected or approved within 24 hours. Okay, now there's another one. It's called pending revision. That would be here. So the request has been rejected and is pending revision. You will find a task in your workflow to manage it. Perfect. Now the next one would be this one here, reprocessed order. So the request has been processed again or reprocessed and is pending revision. Okay. So we've already got these KPIs. Now the next one, it's been rejected, for example. There we go. And the last one, where it's been approved. Here. Okay, with this we've already configured the star message event and all the KPIs. The next thing I want to do is configure the supervisors task. So I'll click on it. I'll indicate the type of user who's going to interact with this activity. And here I'm going to create a form. I could create one from scratch, or I could copy an existing one. So I'm going to copy the material request form that we just created. And the first thing I want to do is change its name. So here I'm going to call this review task. Okay, I'm going to call it supervisors task. I also want to change this little title here. You can see it's color white. If we want to see the source, we can actually see it here. So it would be the exact same thing. If I changed the text here, it would be the same as changing it out here. Okay. So I've changed the title. The next thing I want to do is make these fields only visible, not editable. So here I'm changing this and the comments too. And I want to add a new field because we have to prove, the supervisor has to decide whether he approves or not. So I'm going to add another field. It's going to be a yes, no type field. Okay, we don't have any yes, no type field yet because this is the first process I'm creating. So I'm going to create a new field. It's going to be called approved. There we go. Okay, so here it is. I think this time I'm going to make the form a little bit larger. Something like this. So we can decide whether we've approved or not. And I'm going to add another field that's called description so we can add some comments. So I'll click here on, again, a multiple line text field. I'll create a new one called description. That's about it. Now here I'm going to change the size of the input of this field, and I'm going to make both mandatory. There we go. I'm going to change the button. I want it to appear over here. Another thing I'd like to do, for example, if we approve, I don't need these comments. Only if we reject. If we say, no, I don't approve, then we have to add comments. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to condition this field. So it's going to be conditioned. And here I'm going to add a condition. It's really easy to create conditions. I'll just say if it's approved equal to no. So here we have field approved, operator is equal to, and here we have the value no. So when that happens, when this condition is met, then the description field is going to appear. All right. One more thing we're going to do. We had a confirmation division. Remember when I copied the form, I actually copied everything. Here I have the confirmation division. I can see it because it's behind. Okay. And I can change it a little bit. So we're going to apply a few changes here. I'm going to change this text. There we go. So we've got our confirmation division, and I'm going to add one more detail to the main division here. I'm going to add a few instructions so this person knows exactly what they have to do. So I'll leave this down here, and I'm going to add another complement. So here I'm going to add this bit of text. I'm also going to add, I'm going to change a bit the text so there's more space. There we go. Perfect. So now I've got the supervisor's task with the instructions. They can decide whether they want to approve or not. And here we've got an input field where they can add some comments. These fields are mandatory. These are not. These are just visible information. And here we can not send the request. Here we're going to submit. The action is finished. Okay, and it's taking us to the confirmation division. Perfect. We finished with the supervisor's task. Now, we're missing this other task here, the requester's task. So I'm going to continue with this configuration. We can see it's quite similar. This time, when I say I want to copy an existing form, I actually have two. I have the material request form and the supervisor's task. This time I'm going to copy the supervisor's task. So I enter, I'll change its name. We're going to change this text here too. There we go. Now, I'm going to change the form a little bit because this description and this field here cannot be editable anymore. I'm going to change the label here. So it's the same field, but it's going to have a different label in this form. For example, supervisor's comments. And I'm going to make this one here editable and mandatory again. Besides this, I want to add an instruction, but it's going to pop up in front of everything when we open the form. So I'm going to add a new division. Okay, and in the configuration of this division, I'm going to add a veil around it. And besides, I'm going to give it a name, for example, warning. And here I want to add some text. So something like this. This could be color blue, maybe bold. And I'm going to add some margins. There we go. So I've got my box for my message, for my warning message. I'm going to stretch it to make it a little bit larger. And I'm also going to add a button so we can actually close it. So I click here on Add Button, and I'm going to call this button Accept. And the action is going to be hide this division. So I'm going to say I want it to have a trigger. And here we're going to create an action where we're going to hide the division that we just created. Oops, forgot to save. There we go. Okay, that's enough. I already have my revision task here configured. I'm ready to work with. I'm going to check the confirmation division to make sure everything is okay there too. Okay, that's okay. So I've got several layers of information. I'll save and exit. And now I want to configure the gateways. Okay, so here we have to make sure we want to allow the flow to continue if the supervisor has approved. So I'll click here on the gateway and I'll say that the outlet yes, the flow is only going to go out under this condition. And the condition is going to be that the field approved must be equal to yes. Okay, so we've got this gateway configured. I'm missing this gateway here, but we actually forgot to add a field here in this form. Let me go back and I'll show you guys. Because here we have to decide whether we want to reprocess or not. So I should add another field to this form. So I'm going to click here. Oops, there we go. So here I can call it reprocess. And I will add it to the form. I could add it down here. And this one's going to be mandatory too. Okay, so here we're going to decide if we want to reprocess or not. Now that we have this field, I can use it in this decision here. So I'll click on the gateway, I'll add the condition, and I'll say if the field reprocess is equal to yes, then the flow has to go through the outlet yes. Okay, this is the outlet I'm configuring. If not, it's going to go through the outlet no. Now the last thing I want to do is test the process. It's already completed. Well, there's one bit left. I've got to configure this notification. So we're going to do that now. Here I'll select notifier, who I want to notify, and in which way I want to notify this user, for example, via an email. And now I'd have to add who's going to be the addressee. For example, the addressee could be whoever's email I typed in the form. And the text has to be defined here. The content, the body of the email. So I'm going to design the email here. I'm going to add some text, for example, dear, and here I could actually add the name because I can retrieve information from the panel, like whoever started the process. And I'm going to continue formatting this email until it has a good amount of text, something that I like. And with this, we finish the configuration of the process. Here we can see I've added a few more fields. I've actually added an image. I've styled it a little bit. And with this, we're ready to go. The last thing I want to do is add the subject to the email. For example, okay, so we've got the text, the body, we've got the subject, and we've got the addressee that we've indicated here. And this should be enough to start testing my process. Before I test it, I want to add some additional information to be able to track the process. In order to do that, I'm going to select a few fields to be used as something that we call themes. A theme is just whatever bit of data we want to use to better identify our process. We'll see this later on as soon as I start running the tests. So I'm going to say I want the product to be a theme, and I also want maybe the comments to be another theme, or better yet, the email. There we go. So with this, I'm ready to start running tests.